In search of a financial opportunity to pay off student loans, a young Black American woman moves to South Korea to work. As the author, Bootsy W. recalls culture shock and fun adventures in a country far from home, she's also faced with anti-Black racism and featureism, quickly learning that white supremacy is practiced not only by whites, but by those that are categorized as people of color. Based on her 10 years of living abroad, the book, Ago Igo, compares and contrasts Korea versus the United States on subjects such as code, communal living, racism, effective protests, global alliances, warrior class, music, political correctness, health, aging, money, and the coronavirus. This blunt memoir is uncomfortable, humorous, and educational. Help fight propaganda and mainstream agendas by picking up a copy of Ago Igo on Amazon.com.
Yes, welcome back to the African Diaspora News channel. My name is Richard Sudan. Thank you very much for tuning in. Before we get going, please like and subscribe, support the network, sign up to the website and spread the word about the only place on the internet for true newsworthy independent Black media. Please spread the word. It's vitally important at this time. Now, a quick story I wanted to bring to you today really is something I've been looking at quite closely now, as I know a lot of you have, and I've actually written a few articles about this and done numerous reports on it, and that's about the so-called Proud Boys, the white supremacist armed militia who were founded a few years ago by Vice co-founder Gavin McInnes. Now, what we're seeing, of course, is as the months have gone on since January the 6th, more and more evidence has come to light implementing white supremacist groups, including the Proud Boys, in what Christopher Wray, the FBI director, coined as an act of domestic terrorism. In fact, just days ago, there was a member of the Proud Boys known as Milkshake who was arrested, and he literally was caught saying, let's take over the effing Capitol, wearing a hat which I think said something like Trump, guns and God. If ever there was someone who fits the bill for a terrorist, alleged terrorist, I should say, for YouTube, it's this guy. Now, more and more evidence has come to light, also showing that the Proud Boys are not some fringe marginal group. Neither are the rest of these groups, the Oath Keepers, so on and so forth. You have politicians that are linked to these groups. You have Trump's former advisor, Roger Stone, who was literally pictured with some of these white supremacists on the morning of January the 6th. Of course, Roger Stone denied any prior knowledge of January the 6th, as of course he would. And of course, there's many other instances. We can see Roger Stone as one example of someone implicated with these white supremacist groups. He's been pictured in the past throwing up the infamous white supremacist OK sign with Proud Boys, and the list goes on and it's endless. Now, the point I really wanted to make today is that the Proud Boys, despite being involved in an obvious act of terrorism, despite Christopher Wray and the FBI acknowledging January the 6th as an act of terrorism, the Proud Boys are yet to be designated as a terrorist group. Canada did it. Of course, Canada is a racist country in itself. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he's been pictured wearing blackface, which is hugely offensive with a violent racist history attached to it. But nonetheless, Canada did designate the Proud Boys as a terror group, but the United States has, of course, not made that move yet. But maybe we shouldn't be surprised because, let's not forget that it took the United States about 150 years to designate the Ku Klux Klan as a terrorist group in 2017, and that only arguably happened because there were loads of conversations about racism happening around about that time. But of course, it does beg the question why. Now, recently we learned that the Republicans blocked a so-called independent investigation into the events of January the 6th. Now, I think the reason why they would arguably do that is the same reason why the Proud Boys haven't been designated. The Republicans know that far too many people that are linked to the Republicans are linked to these groups, and a full and thorough investigation into January the 6th is going to implicate way too many people, which would be embarrassing for them. And I think this is the ultimate reason why the Proud Boys are not designated as a terror group, because we know that the police forces all across the United States are full of white supremacist groups. The police in the United States, in my view, are not fit for purpose. You cannot reform them. You cannot reform a culture of hundreds of years of racism. It's not going to happen. Sane human beings, especially the police that are trained, they know what the correct thing to do is in a situation. You can't train people not to be racist. You can't train people not to go out with intent to hurt and kill black people. This is an illogical fallacy. And in my view, all this talk of reform is really just a way of pacifying public outcry and legitimate demands to defund the police. And so the police are so deeply implicated with groups like the Proud Boys that, of course, to designate therefore the Proud Boys as a terrorist group is basically going to mean that you're throwing so-called law enforcement into the mix, and so-called law enforcement become terrorists. If the Proud Boys are designated as a terror group, then you're going to have how many thousands of police officers now literally falling into the category of terrorists. Now, for a country like the United States, this is way too embarrassing, and it opens a Pandora's box that nobody wants to open. And I think another interesting sort of question or paradox here is that I think if any other group had ransacked the Capitol like the Proud Boys did, let's say, for example, it was black people or Muslims or black Muslims that had, blitzed the Capitol, we know what the reaction would have been. They wouldn't have even got within yards of the Capitol buildings. They'd have been gunned down by security and law enforcement. But of course, we saw these white supremacists able to climb all over the buildings, to break into the buildings, all kinds of havoc they were able to wreak. And of course, we can see there's the double standard there. Another thing which I think stands out is, it took, even though Christopher Wray did acknowledge, the FBI director Christopher Wray, he did acknowledge January the 6th as terrorism, it took him about 2 or 3 months to do so. I think he did it on March the 10th or something like this. But compare that with how quickly, you remember there was another attack by a black guy on the Capitol. I think he killed a police officer or something like that. This was a few months back, and you saw how quick the media were to get on code and to basically try and link this guy to the Nation of Islam, even though there was no real link to the Nation of Islam. It took the media and the sort of political establishment minutes to make a very tenuous link where there was no link between this guy and the Nation of Islam. Obviously, there's a lot of mixed views about the Nation of Islam. I'm just, saying it how I see it. And of course, groups like the Proud Boys get a free run. And of course, apart from them not being designated, of course, police forces are riddled with these groups. But of course, allowing them to operate, basically sends a very specific message, not just to white supremacist groups, but any white supremacist of any section of society. It sends out a very specific message. And I would say we've seen this message echoed in other forms. For example, we've seen how quickly did the anti-Asian hate bill get passed through the political American process, to criminalize hate crimes against Asian people. It happened very, very quickly. How quick did the LGBT community get things? Very, very quickly. When you give all of these things to other groups in America and you make a specific, obvious, open attempt really to not do anything for black Americans, it sends a very specific message. And I think that's what's happening here with these white supremacist groups. We of course saw that it was a police officer or someone in the security, I think it was a police officer, who literally opened the gates at January the 6th and allowed these groups to get in. You saw one police officer posing with one of the Proud Boys, and so the lines are just blurred and muddy because the Proud Boys often are police and police are often Proud Boys, and I think that's a big reason why they didn't get designated, much like other groups. But again, you see the double standard in terms of how other groups, how other people are treated. I do think more and more people are wising up to this reality, but I think not nearly quick enough. There's been so many reports. I think the most recent one was in 2015, even from the FBI itself, that has warned of the deep infiltration of white supremacist groups in law enforcement. There are so many examples of it. But, this is the Pandora's box that needs to be opened, in my humble opinion. You're not going to just root out hundreds of years of culturally sort of normalized racism in these police forces through a bunch of laws and reforms. It's the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act today, and it'll be something else tomorrow. But plain and simply, these people that commit these acts of terrorism on the black community, they need to be punished. They need to be punished quickly, and this is the only way you're going to root it out. You cannot appeal to the sensibilities and morality of white supremacists because they have no morality. So this system is rotten, it's defunct. I don't know how the problem of law enforcement in the United States can really be rectified. I personally don't think it can be without a seriously radical plan that gets the political will, and I simply don't think that is going to happen. Joe Biden fairly recently, I think in his first joint address to Congress off the back of the Derek Chauvin verdict, he pledged to tackle head-on white supremacy, but he's not serious. There is a report we flagged up here on the African Diaspora News channel of a group of international lawyers who studied very carefully a number of cases in the United States over a number of years. And they concluded, and they did not come to the conclusion lightly, that anti-black policing in the United States constitutes a crime against humanity. And not only that, these lawyers put a number of very serious, very thoughtful, very carefully crafted recommendations that the government could literally follow if it was really serious about dismantling white supremacy within its ranks of law enforcement. But of course, we know that's not going to happen. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out really, that the Proud Boys are yet to be designated a terrorist group. I think the FBI and Christopher Wray even said there's no official federal list or something along those lines of domestic terror groups. And that's probably because, or in part, the FBI have acknowledged actually that the bulk of their resources now are spent on tackling white supremacism, which is the biggest threat to the United States, not some outside force. But yeah, this is heading for another sort of collision course, really. We're going to see a lot more scenes of this nature. But yeah, high time the Proud Boys and other groups were designated as a terror group. It's not going to happen, certainly not going to happen anytime soon. But yeah, the very least we can do, I suppose, is talk about this, spread the word, spread information. The whole world, though, I can tell you, definitely in Britain, is looking at America very differently now. People are starting to see the complete hypocrisy with the way black people are treated in the US, the way white supremacy is just given a free run. More and more people are seeing it, and the younger generations coming up are definitely going to see it. So yeah, thank you for tuning in for now. This is the African Diaspora News Network. Please remember to subscribe and like and support the platform. Very important, very necessary, very vital at this time. Thank you once again. My name is Richard Sudan, and we will see you next time.
Everyone, please make sure you subscribe to the African Diaspora News Channel app on these platforms.